The title of today's talk is Patience in Samsara. I hope you don't think that our English is bad, because then it's the wrong spelling. It's spelled with TS rather than a CE. Although, if it's spelled with a CE, Khanti or patience is still needed when you're in Samsara, especially if you're a patient. Now, this talk tonight is based on a very interesting sutta called Gilana Sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya, the book of trees, sutta number 22. Gilana means a sick person or a patient. So it's a patient sutta. In this sutta, the Buddha compared three types of patients in this world to three types of people in this world who can benefit from his teachings. The three types of patients that he talked about are: one, a patient who, whether he can get suitable food, medicine, or nursing, will never be able to recover from his sickness. The second type is one who will recover from the sickness, irrespective of whether he gets good or suitable food, medicine, or nursing. And the last type of person is one who will only recover if he gets the appropriate food, medicine, and nursing. I will now explain in more detail these three types of patients. The first patient is one who cannot be cured whether he gets the appropriate conditions or not. I think we are very aware nowadays of people who suffer from terminal cancer, from heart disease, and so forth. And you will see that there are people who are very rich, millionaires, wealthy people, who get cancer. And they can go to all extent to try to cure their illness. They go to see the best doctor in the world, the best specialist in the world. They take all the best medicine. They go for radiotherapy, for chemotherapy, and all sorts of therapy. And not only do they explore Western medicine, but they also do alternative medicine as well, as a last resort. They try urine therapy, qigong, yoga, tai chi, pranic healing, psychic healing, and so all sorts of healing in order to get well. But unfortunately, for these sort of people, they can never get well. It's probably because of their karma, as we Buddhists would say. Muslims and Christians would say that it's the will of Allah, right? Or the will of God. Whatever it is, if one is able to arrive at a state of acceptance, accepting whether it is due to your karma, or whether it is because it's God's calling, Allah's will, if you can come to that stage of acceptance, you can die a peaceful death. The second sort of patient is one who can recover from that illness, irrespective of whether he gets suitable food, medicine, or nursing. You can see that in the streets. You go around the streets, you can see those beggars, people who are tigasuku, they are mentally off. You can see them going around in rags, they sleep on the road, they don't bathe often, they've got matted hair, they're very dirty and filthy, but you never hear of them catching a cold. They are more healthy perhaps than the millionaires. The millionaires, they have got heart disease, they've got too much cholesterol, they've got this and that, and then they will go on all sorts of diets. No oil diet, no fish diet, no meat diet, all sorts of diet just to be healthy. At the end of it all, at the end of the year, they go for the medical checkup, their cholesterol has increased. Well, these people are in the streets, they don't even take care of anything. They're not even conscious of what is health food. And yet, they don't die, If they have any sickness, they can cure themselves, even though they cannot get any suitable food or medicine. This second sort of patient, I would say, is like the hell beings. As you read in the suttas, in the scriptures, they tell us that when a being falls into hell, he will be tortured and tormented. He may be put in the fire, he'll be burned, people will have spears poke through him. Dogs will be running after him and biting him. Crows will be pecking at him. He'll be chopped to pieces, but they will never die. They will have to go through all this suffering. They want to die, but they cannot die because they have not paid up their karma. So probably these people you see in the streets, these Aggacitta people who are mentally deranged, they have their karmic debt to pay. It's like living in hell on this earth itself, not another dimension. Talking about suitable food, medicine, and nursing, we must also remember that there are many ways to cure a disease. From the Western medical point of view, diseases are caused by viruses and bacteria. But viruses and bacteria never existed to us Orientals. In Ayurveda medicine, in traditional Chinese herbal medicine, we don't talk about viruses and bacteria. What do we talk about? We talk about the imbalance of the elements. In Ayurveda, we talk about the imbalance of the elements in the body. Chinese also talk about imbalance of the elements as well as the blockages in the body because your qi cannot move through your body. People in India also have the concept of qi, they call it prana. And in Japan, they call it ki. So the concept of this psychic energy and this electromagnetic field within the human body is also prevalent in our Eastern cultures. So although they have a different basis, one basis is the killing of viruses and bacteria in order to cure diseases. And the other is to take food, suitable food and herbs in order to balance your body, to balance the elements in your body, to make your qi move in a way that removes all the blockages in your body. They also have their positive effects. They can cure a particular ailment depending on circumstances. Some people try Western medicine first, and after seeing that it doesn't work, they try Eastern medicine, and then it works, or vice versa. So when you want to say that the first patient is an incurable, you must explore all the possibilities first before you say that he's incurable. The third type of patient is one who can only recover if he gets the right medicine, right food, right nursing. You may try Western medicine, cannot work, so he tries Qigong therapy, he tries pranic healing, tries taking herbs, going on a special diet. So the Buddha said that it is on account of this third sort of patient that he has allowed a special diet for sick monks, he has allowed medicine for sick monks, he has allowed nurses for a sick monk. Let me elaborate on this, because in the Vinaya Pitaka, monastic rules and regulations for monks, monks are not allowed to ask for anything from someone who has not invited him to ask for the requisites, unless that person is related to him by blood. But there are certain exceptions. If a monk is sick, then he can ask medicine or food or anything from anybody. So there is one allowance that the Buddha has made. And the Buddha said that that allowance was made on account of this third sort of patient who can be cured only by suitable food and appropriate medicine. He has also made a special allowance for a nurse, a fellow monk, to nurse a sick monk. You have all heard of the story of the Buddha going around the monastery and meeting with a sick monk whom nobody wanted to take care of. That was because it seems that the monk didn't do anything for the community. He was probably a very introverted monk. Maybe he was very committed in doing his own practice, so he didn't help out in communal chores, and he kept to himself, a very reclusive sort of monk. So because of that, nobody wanted to take care of him when he was sick, so he was lying in his own filth. When the Buddha saw him, he was filled with compassion, and he asked Ananda to help him to clean up that monk, to change his clothes, and to nurse him. After that, the Buddha called the monks together and scolded the monks. He says, "Monks, you have left home, and you have neither mother nor father to take care of you. So who's going to take care of you when you're sick if we don't take care of one another?" Then he said, "Monks, those who would take care of me will take care of the sick. So you see that the Buddha was actually talking to monks, telling monks to take care of themselves. He's not asking monks to become male nurses and go to the hospital and take care of lay people. Though this has been misquoted many times, as though monks are obliged to do social service, to go out and help people who are suffering. No, the Buddha was actually referring to monks. So on account of this third sort of patient, however, the Buddha continued, on account of this third patient also, the other patients should be taken care of. They should also be nursed. Why should they be nursed? The Buddha did not tell the reason. He just ended there. If a person is incurable, what's the point of wasting your time trying to help him? If a patient can cure himself whether he gets the right medicine or not, so why worry? Just leave him alone and eventually he'll cure himself. Just like the animals, the dogs and the cats. You see that when you're sick, they will stop eating and they will go and eat some grass and they will vomit out and they'll take a rest for a few days. They just go on a fast and then they'll be well again. So the commentators tell us that there is a reason behind this. For one who is incurable, especially a monk, if he's just left alone like that without being attended to, he would harbor thoughts of aversion towards his fellow monks. When he's dying, he would harbor the thought that, if they had taken care of me, I would have been saved, I would have recovered. But nobody took care of me, you see, so I'm dying now. And because of that grudge in his mind, after he dies, he would be reborn in an unhappy destiny. So because of that, the Buddha said that one should also take care of those who are incurable, or appears to be incurable. Although this sick person may be attended to by monks for a long time, and people know that he is incurable, he is struck with terminal cancer, he's got some incurable disease, and he's in a coma, he's on the life support system for many months, and doesn't seem to be any hope for him. So why not just abandon him? So on the other hand, if one just continues to attend to this monk, and towards the end of his life, he may come to that level of acceptance that I talked about earlier. Psychologists have found that when it has been announced to a patient that he has a terminal disease, one of the first things is rejection, disbelief. Patients refuse to believe, refuse to accept the fact that he has contacted a terminal case. In fact, there's a denial, and there's always this question of why must it be me? So this is a very natural psychological occurrence for sick people. You know that, these monks, they are taking care so much of me. In spite of all their efforts, I still cannot be cured. It must be due to my own karma. So when he dies, he will die with a peaceful mind, accepting his karma. And because of that, he can go to a good destination. Then why does one need to attend to a person who can cure himself irrespective of whether he can get suitable food, medicine, or nursing? That is because by helping him, he can get well sooner, and then he can apply himself to his work as a monk, then of course to the study and practice of the Dhamma Vinaya. And he can get consummation. The Buddha then compared these three types of patients to three types of people in this world who can benefit from his teachings. The first type of person is one who can never benefit from, I like to say this in Pali because it's not as simple as it seems. Neva okamati niyamang kusalesu dhammesu samattam. Never okamati enters niyamang, the path of assurance. Kusalesu dhammesu, in wholesome things. Samattam, perfection or correctness. This is the literal translation. So whether this person has a chance to meet the Buddha or not, whether he has the chance to listen to the Dhamma proclaimed by the Buddha or not, he will never be able to enter the path of assurance, the perfection of wholesome states. What does that mean? What is the path of assurance? What is the perfection of wholesome states? The commentary tells us that the path of assurance refers to the four supramundane paths, which means it's enlightenment. Samattam perfection, rightness, correctness refers to Nibbana. So what he's trying to say is that some people are such that even if they have the opportunity to meet the Buddha, even if they had the opportunity to listen to the Buddha's Dhamma, they will not be able to get enlightened. A couple of examples for this. During the Buddha's time, there were many people who had the chance to meet the Buddha, especially the 6 teachers who were contemporary to the Buddha. They met with the Buddha, they debated with him, and yet they could not realize the Dhamma. There were other wandering ascetics. They had the good opportunity to meet with the Buddha, to talk with him, to discuss and debate with him, and yet they could not benefit from the Buddha's teachings. The second sort of person is one who can enter into this path of assurance, the perfection of wholesome states, whether or not he meets with the Buddha or listens to the Buddha Dhamma. Now this is a very interesting part of the sutta. This person, whether he has the chance to meet the Buddha or not, whether he has the chance to listen to the Buddha's Dhamma or not, he can still get enlightened. What does this mean? The commentaries tell us that this means the Pacceka Buddhas. You know what Pacceka Buddhas are? Our understanding of the Pacceka Buddhas is based on the commentaries. They tell us that the Pacceka Buddha is one who is self-enlightened out of the Buddha Sasana, and they are unable to preach the Dhamma to others. They are loners, and they don't need a teacher to get enlightened. But they can exist only outside the Buddha Sasana. Outside the Buddha Sasana means when the Buddha Sasana has disappeared from the face of the earth. Now, let me go on to the third sort of person before I come back to this one. The third sort of person is one who can only enter the path of assurance, the perfection of wholesome states, if he or she meets with the Buddha or listens to the Buddha Dhamma. And the Buddha said that it is on account of this third sort of person that he gives Dhamma talks. Because if this third sort of person did not have the chance to meet with the Buddha, they would not get enlightened. However, the Buddha said that on account of this third sort of person, the Dhamma should also be preached to the other types of persons. Now this is interesting, because when the Buddha says that the Dhamma should also be preached to the other sort of persons, the second sort of person is supposed to be a Pacceka Buddha. It's not supposed to exist when the Buddha is around. So it's interesting because I was doing some research into this concept of Pacceka Buddha. In fact, there's a book that was written. It's called The Pacceka Buddha, the concept of the Pacceka Buddha according to the canon and the commentaries. It's not available, unfortunately, in Sukihotu. So I've done my own research. I must really thank the Vipassana Research Institute for coming up with a CD-ROM where we can get all the Tipitaka, its commentaries and sub-commentaries, so that now it's very, very convenient to do research. You just type in a word, search for Pacceka Buddha, and you can find all its occurrences in the whole Tipitaka. There are incredibly very, very few references in the suttas on Pacceka Buddha. And there's no particular sutta that tells us what a Pacceka Buddha is according to what we understand it to be now. As I said, our understanding of the Pacceka Buddha is based on the commentary. The commentary also takes its basis, its interpretation on one particular sutta in the Sutta Nipata called the Rhinoceros Horn. Have you heard of it? It's called Khagga Visana Sutta. The word Pacceka Buddha is not even mentioned in the sutta, but it talks about a particular recluse or a monk who likes to be alone, but there's no reference to a Pacceka Buddha. The references that we can find in the Pacceka Buddha can be found in the Anguttara Nikaya, book of 10, sutta number 16, called the Ahuneya Sutta, where the Buddha talked about who is worthy of offerings, who is worthy of hospitality. And then he says, these are the people who are worthy. The Sammasambuddha, 1. 2 is the Pacceka Buddha, then the Arahants, the Anagamis, the Sakadagamis, the Sotapans, and the Cakkavati. Cakkavati is a universal monarch. Then in Velama Sutta, which I talked about several times since I was here the last occasion, talks also about different grades of giving, the spectrum of giving, how great the karmic returns will be. Also, there's a grade according to attainment, starting from a worldling to a Sotapan, to a Sakadagami, to a Nagami, to Arahant, to Pachika Buddha, to Sammasambuddha, to the Sammasambuddha and the Bhikkhu Sangha, and so forth. Then in Isigili Sutta, the Buddha gave a long list of Pachika Buddhas who used to stay in a place called Isigala. It's called Isigala because Isi means hermit, Gala means swallow. It's a place where hermits are swallowed, because the Pachika Buddhas would just walk into the mountain and disappear. There are many of them. The whole list of Pachika Buddhas are named. But the Buddha did not mention anything about what these Pachika Buddhas were like when they existed. There is also a story of Dagarasiki Pachika Buddha mentioned in the Udana, chapter 5, Sutta number 3. It's called Suppa Buddha Kuti Sutta. Not Super Buddha, no, S-U-P-P-A. This Suppa Buddha was actually a leper. One day he saw the Buddha surrounded by many people. They were surrounding the Buddha because he was giving a Dhamma talk. And when he saw the crowd from a distance, he thought, well, perhaps I'll go near and I might be able to get some food. As he approached the crowd, he saw that it was not a festival. They were just sitting there listening to the Buddha giving a talk. So he decided, well, since I'm here, I might as well sit at the fringe and listen to the talk. As he sat there, the Buddha was using his psychic power to assess the crowd and see who today has enough paramis to be enlightened. And then his wisdom fell on Suppa Buddha. It seems that Suppa Buddha had the paramis to be enlightened on the very day. He was a leper. He came actually for food, but instead of that, he got spiritual food. He listened to the Buddha's Dhamma. Then the Buddha was observing him mentally all the time. And when he saw that the Suppa Buddha's mind was pliant, receptive, and free of the hindrances, then he talked about the Four Noble Truths. At the end of which, Suppa Buddha got the Dhamma eye. Don't know whether he did jhana or not before that. After that, at the end of the talk, he approached the Buddha and praised the Buddha. This is like holding a lamp in darkness so you can see the light. This is a stock phrase. And he took refuge in the Triple Gem for life. Shortly afterwards, he was gored to death by a cow. So the monks were wondering what happened to him. He was a leper and he had sat at the fringe of the audience listening to the Buddha's talk. And now what had happened to him? Where has he gone to after his death? During the Buddha's time, leprosy was a dreadful disease where there was no cure. And so anyone who had contracted this disease would be an outcast. They would be ostracized. They cannot come near anyone for fear of infection. So he was not only a leper, he was an outcast, he was poor, dressed in rags, very poor. And yet, after he died, he was born in Tawatingsa, heaven. Then the bhikkhus went to ask the Buddha, what happened to this guy? And then the Buddha says, well, he's very clever. He didn't torment me with too many questions. He just listened to my talk, and now he has got the Ariyadana, the wealth of a noble one. Now he's reborn in Tawatingsa. So the Buddha talked about his past. He said that in a past life, this Suppa Buddha was actually a rich man's son. One day he was going to the park for amusement, and along the way he met a Pachika Buddha called Dagarasiki. When he saw him, he looked down upon him and says, what is this leper doing around with the rags? And then he spat on him. He wouldn't know that he's a Pachika Buddha, he's just like another Swami. And you go to India, you see all these Swamis all over the place, you don't know which one is the real one and which one is not. It's just like now you go, you see all these bogus monks around, you don't know who is the real monk and who is not. So he spat on him with disdain and contempt. And because of that, he spent many hundreds of years, thousands of years, thousands and thousands of years in hell. After he came out from hell, because of the residue of his bad karma, he was born as a human being, but as a leper, poor, wretched, and miserable. But I don't know what good karma he did in the past to be able to have planted the seed of enlightenment. These are only the very sparse information that we have from the suttas about particular Buddhas. They never really tell us exactly what you mean by outside the Buddha Sasana. But it's food for thought because the Buddha said that on account of the third type of person who can only get enlightened by meeting with the Buddha or listening to the Buddha's talk, one should also give talks to the other types of person, the other two types, one who cannot benefit and one who can become enlightened, whether or not he meets with the Buddha or listens to the Buddha Dhamma. Right? Which means that there are such people around. According to this sutta, the implication is that outside the Buddha Sasana, which means people who have not heard of the Buddha Dhamma, if they are practicing by themselves somewhere, they have some past paramis where they might have heard the Dhamma before, perhaps in the past life, or they might have done some good deeds before in the past life. If they are meditating somewhere in the cave in the Himalayas, they could also become enlightened. They could also enter the path of assurance, the perfection of wholesome states. So this is food for thought, and also something that we should bear in mind so that we can keep an open mind. A lot of conflicts arise in the world among religions and among Buddhists because they always claim that theirs is the only way. Only they can get enlightened. The question is, why must one give Dhamma talk to the first type of person? He's not going to get enlightened anyway. During the Buddha's time, there were a group of 6 monks, very notorious. And on account of them, we have got so many rules. Cannot do this, cannot do that. Because they are the ones who always misbehave themselves, and then the people will complain, the monks will complain, and then the Buddha will say, okay, from today onwards, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. After he laid down the rule, they will do something else. So that's why we have hundreds and hundreds, thousands of rules, minor rules, all on account of this group of 6 monks. And yet, the Buddha never asked them to disrobe. He had the compassion to keep them in the sasana, knowing very well that they are not going to get enlightened. No, they are still monks. They still listen to Dhamma talks, and there are many monks during the Buddha's time, who were not enlightened. Some of them helped to perpetuate the Buddha Dhamma, because after the Buddha got enlightened, as time went on, he gave more and more suttas. So the monks had to remember more and more things. So their duties actually increased compared to at the very beginning of the Buddha's ministry. For the first 60 arahants, after they had become arahants, the Buddha sent them away, say, you all should go on separate paths and spread the Dhamma that is beautiful in the beginning, the middle, and the end. At that time, they didn't have much to learn, They just heard 1 or 2 Dhamma talks, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Anattalakkana Sutta, fire sermon. And after that, they were away already, teaching the Dhamma. Later on, as more and more rules were set, as more and more discourses were given by the Buddha, and because we had no tape recorders during that time, we had no books, and everything had to be learned by heart and memorized and stored in the chip in your mind. So these monks naturally were split into 2 groups. One is those who would remember the suttas to perpetuate the teachings. Until now, 2,500 years later, we still have the teachings with us because of these monks. So we shouldn't look down upon scholar monks, to say that you people are just study and you don't know anything. How can you know whether your study is correct or not? Then we have another group of monks who are more inclined towards practice. They just listen to 1 or 2 talks and then they go to the forest and you just practice until they get enlightened. In fact, there's one sutta called Mahachunda Sutta. I forget in which Nikaya it is. Where Mahachunda Thera told the monks, he says, monks, you should not criticize one another. Scholar monks should not go around saying, what are these meditating monks doing? They use the word jhana, nijjhana, ujjhana, what jhana, and all sorts of jhana with the prefix in the beginning to show that they are doing all sorts of thinking. What do they know? They don't know the Dhamma. They just do all this jhana thing. By the way, the Buddha also used the word jayata to mean to meditate. And then these scholar monks were criticizing the meditating monks. He says, what do these meditating monks know? They are just doing all the nijja, ujja, and all the jhana. They don't even know whether what they are doing is correct or not. I think this is particularly true in certain Buddhist countries. For example, in Thailand, we have the forest tradition and we have the city monks. And maybe it grew out of the way the system was developed through the years. People got very disillusioned with city monks and the way they behaved, and too much stress being put onto the learning of theory, rote learning of the texts. So they split, and a group of them went to the forest and they just practiced. But it's very dangerous to practice without having a roadmap. One time, many years ago, we were in the US with Sadhu Pandita in 1984. So we rented a car, and our kapiya was driving us around with a roadmap and all. Still, we got lost. I think the same thing will happen in KL also. If you have a roadmap, so you can get lost. What to say if you don't have a roadmap? Anyone can claim they have jhanas. Anyone can claim that they have got enlightened. Anyone can claim that they have stream entry. How do you know which one is the one that's got the real thing? We must have something to refer to check with. So that's why the Buddha said that these other two types of people should also be given Dhamma talks. The first one, even though they cannot get enlightened in this very life, at least they will have the chance to, that I translated just now. I will go through the Pali again. Okamati niyamam. Okamati is to enter. Niyamam is the path of assurance. In many suttas, the word niyama refers to the Noble Eightfold Path, to the four paths to enlightenment. And in many suttas, the word sammattam, kusulesu dhammesu sammattam. Sammattam actually comes from the word samma. Samma ditti, samma sankappa and all that. So sammattam is an abstract noun ending with a double T at the end, which means that it's a state of rightness, state of correctness, perfection. In one sutta called Michatta Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, and also another Michatta Sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. There are two Michatta Suttas. Michatta is the opposite of Samatta. You put the double T at the end, so the state of wrongness. So the Buddha was trying to differentiate between Michatta and Samatta. In the Samyutta Nikaya, Magga Samyutta, when he talks about Samatta, he talks about the Noble Eightfold Path. So you start off with Samadhi, you end with Samasamadhi. Then in the Anguttara Nikaya, in the Book of Tenths, Sutta 103, which is also called Michatta Sutta, he talks about Samatta as having 10 factors, starting with Samadhi. One who has got Samadhi will have right thought. One who has right thought will have right action and so forth. He does it in a linear way. After Samasamadhi, it's not the end, He adds two more things. Now, we understand Samadhi to be both an understanding of karma as well as samanyana. Because we only talk about Noble Eightfold Path, we don't talk about the last two samattas. The last two samattas are samanyana and samavimutti. Samanyana is right knowledge or right insight. And samavimutti is right liberation. So that is actually the culmination of the Noble Eightfold Path. It does not culminate in Samasamadhi, but it culminates in Samavimutti, right liberation. Michatta is the opposite. It starts off with wrong view, it ends with wrong liberation. Wrong liberation means you have misconception of liberation. You think that you're liberated, but actually you're not. And I think that many people are probably more Michatta than Samatta. So the Buddha says that it is on account of this third sort of person that he has given Dhamma talk, and he has also allowed the monks to give Dhamma talks. During the Buddha's time, many of them were meditative. And on Uposatha days, on the full moon day and the 8th day of the waning and the waxing moon, they just gather around and sit in meditation very quietly. Then the people started to criticize these monks. He says, these monks, are just like animals. They don't talk to one another. Whereas the sectarians, non-Buddhist monastics, at least they give Dhamma talks on such Uposatha days. On account of that, the Buddha allowed the monks to give Dhamma talks on Uposatha days. So every 8th day, there is a Dhamma talk. This sutta, as I said earlier, is very interesting, although it's a very short sutta, because it shows us the possibility that there can be other enlightened beings outside the Buddha Sasana. When I say outside the Buddha Sasana, I mean not necessarily when the Buddha Sasana has disappeared completely from the face of earth. What I mean is that in places where the Buddha Sasana is not known, you could have people who are enlightened. They must have some past paramis before, and they could be what the suttas mean by Pacceka Buddhas. Right, so today I'm going to end the talk early so to give you more chance to ask questions. Last time we asked so much questions that they blew. There was a blackout instead of enlightenment. Okay, any questions?
How do we know that we are enlightened? We see the light.
That's a very subjective experience. Even the enlightenment experience is not really explained in the suttas. The Buddha always used a lot of negative terms to explain enlightenment, precisely because we cannot explain it through our vocabulary. I like to use two similes. One is the simile of a person who is born blind. Now we can see the sky. On a clear day, the sky is blue and is empty and void. Can you try to explain to a person who is born blind what the sky is like? You say it's empty, it's void, it's blue, you will know what you mean. So it's the same thing, for one who is enlightened, he tries to explain the enlightenment experience to someone who is not enlightened, who does not have the eye of wisdom. That person will not be able to understand. Another simile that I would like to use is that of a person who is colorblind. Now, if you look at this carpet in front here, it's got a nice design with different colors. It's red and blue, green, orange, pink, all sorts of color. You have a whole spectrum of colors there. Now, if a person who's born with an eye defect, he's a colorblind person, he stands in front of the carpet and asks you, he can only see black and white, and if you try to explain to him the different colors, he will not be able to understand. In the same way, we can only view things in terms of black and white. There is an existence or there is no existence. Either you are alive or you are dead. If you are dead, that means it's annihilation. If you are alive again forever, it's eternalism. Right? Or you are reborn again and again. There's always life. If there's no life, there must be death. But what is nirvana? It's neither black nor white. It's neither existing nor non-existence. That's why the Buddha always will give a permutation. The Tathagata does not say that he exists after death, nor does he say that he does not exist after death, nor does he say that he neither exists nor not exists, nor does he say that he neither exists. No, I don't know the fourth one really. So, perhaps the enlightenment experience is not so important as the effects of the enlightenment experience. According to Buddhism, the effect of the enlightenment experience is that you will be purified completely of all defilements. So when you realize that you have got no more defilements in you, no more lobha, dosa, moha, no more attachments, no more displeasure in your mind, no more delusion, then you can be sure that you are already enlightened, that you are liberated. The question is whether we have scientific ways of measuring a person's state of enlightenment, Gillian photography or something like that. In fact, right now, if I'm not mistaken, the Dalai Lama is collaborating with a whole group of scientists in the United States to monitor the brain waves of people who are meditating, or very high lamas who have been practicing for many years. And they find that there is a difference in the brain waves of people who go into deep states of samadhi. But still, we cannot really determine when is the level of enlightenment that anyone is talking about. It's still subjective. Right? Even if you define a certain frequency. But how about something beyond that? So is Sai Baba just a magician, or would you consider him enlightened? As I said, the word enlightenment is very subjective. It also depends on which culture or which religion that you belong to. Different religions also use the word enlightenment. They may mean different things. The effect of the Buddhist enlightenment is that you are completely purified. I don't know whether Sai Baba is purified or not, but he certainly is a very powerful person. People have gone there before and they have felt the good vibes. And he does a lot of miracles also, which I think is definitely more indisputable than David Copperfield. Well, you can ask whether David Copperfield is a magician or whether he's enlightened. The question is, if a person has attained Sotapanna this life, will he still be considered Sotapanna the next life, and whether his knowledge of Magga and Phala will still be maintained? According to what I understand, mostly through the commentaries and through what my teachers tell me, because I haven't really done the research onto Sotapanna yet. There's also another interesting thing, because what the commentaries tell us and what we see in the suttas are not always the same. It's not always the same. So that's why Venerable Ajahn Thanisaro, in his book on monastic code, volume 2, he says that since different meditation traditions cannot agree on what actually stream entry is, We cannot consider this as a factor for certain non-offense clause. If you are a Sotapan, you are not considered as having committed that offense because you are unable to commit that offense. So he says we cannot really use that as a determining factor because now different meditating traditions have got different definitions of what Sotapan is. As I said, from what I understand, mostly through the Visuddhimagga and through what my teachers tell me, is that a Sotapan is a Sotapan, and wherever you are, whether this life or next life, you are still a Sotapan and you can still have the experience of Phala. It might come spontaneously. There is a particular sutta, I forget what is its name. It talks about the factors of a Sotapatti Phala, a person who has attained the Sotapatti Phala. It says that when this person goes into isolation, into retreat, settles down and watches the phenomena, then he will calm down very quickly and he can see the arising and passing away of phenomena. There are several other factors also that he will have unshakable faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. Another quality of a Sotapan is that he will not be able to fall into the lower realms. In order to fall into the lower realms, to become a ghost or an animal or a hell being, then you have to create a karma for it. And the karma that has the potential to land you in such woeful planes is breaking the 5 precepts. From what the scriptures tell us, scriptures means the suttas as well as the commentaries. Once a person has attained Sotapan, then he will no longer be able to create more karma so that he will be reborn in such woeful planes. And whatever bad karma that he has created in the past will become defunct. So this bad karma will not land him in the next life in a woeful plane, but they may also ripen in this very life, just like what happened to Venerable Mahamoggallana and many other arahants as well. So if you want to find out whether you are really a Sotapan or not, see, watch your own mind, see whether you can break the 5 precepts or not. It seems that the Sotapan doesn't have to observe the 5 precepts because it's automatic. You observe only when it's not automatic and you have to make an effort to remind yourself to keep it. Well, you don't have to recite the 5 precepts. You are able to keep it within your heart. When you are conscious that you have broken a precept, you can immediately undertake to observe it again. As Buddhists, can we practice pranic healing, Ayurveda, Reiki, and opening of chakra points? Earlier on, I told you about the first type of patient, and that we can only determine whether a person belongs to that category after having exhausted all possibilities of curing. And I also said that we should not restrict ourselves to the Western way of treatment, of medical treatment, because there are various ways of approaching the treatment of diseases. So these are also all geared towards health, physical health, pranic healing, Ayurveda, Reiki, and Qigong, yoga. There's no reason why Buddhists should not take part in such things for health reasons. As for opening of chakra points to improve one's spiritual development, this is something that is quite alien to Theravada Buddhists. Although this is practiced in, I think, Tantric Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism, and perhaps also some other Chinese Mahayana Buddhism. We do not know whether the Buddha actually taught about these chakras or not, but it's not in our scriptures. But remember that the Buddha taught us only a handful of leaves. And you can compare the handful of leaves in your hand to the leaves that are in the forest. You just go to Bukit Kasing or Bukit Kiara, see how much leaves there are in the forest. You don't have to go to the forest. You just take a handful of leaves, you go out to the nearest tree, and you can see how much difference there is. The Buddha only taught us certain things that are very essential for us to get out of suffering. A lot of things he did not teach us. He did not teach us feng shui, all other stuff. But these things were already in existence during the Buddha's time, and you can find them listed out in Brahmajala Sutta, a whole list of them. Some of these arts are still being practiced today. Now, I suppose the thumb of rule that we can apply is that when we practice these things which are not stated in our scriptures, what is our intention? What is our motivation? Is it because we want to have good health so that we can practice better the teachings of the Buddha as enshrined in the scriptures? Or is it because of other things? We want power, fame, communion with a higher being, or union with the Brahma, or whatever. So that's important, to find out what is your reason for participating in such things. If your reason for participating in such things is in order to help you to get out of samsara faster and smoother, just now I mentioned about two additional factors to the Noble Eightfold Path. So Mr. Boy is asking, he says, we have enough problem trying to practice the Eightfold Noble Path. How do we practice the extra two factors? This sammattam, as I said, means perfection or the state of correctness or rightness. It does not necessarily mean it's a path in that sense. It has these factors because the Noble Eightfold Path, as explained in this particular sutta called the Michatta Sutta, the path factors are explained in a linear fashion. When you have right view of the law of karma, for example, you have right view that it's possible to get enlightened, then that will motivate you to have right thoughts. Because the mind is a forerunner of all things. But if you are talking about karma, you better control your thoughts. Then you have right thoughts that will lead to right action. Because the action is a translation of what you think. Right action will also influence your right livelihood. That will also influence right effort. Actually, right effort is also right from the beginning. Since you have right view, then you need to have right effort to put that view into practice, to thoughts, to action, to your livelihood. Then you have right mindfulness. You need to be mindful, to have presence of mind, to be aware, fully aware of what you're doing every day. That also leads to right concentration. When you have right mindfulness, your mind is, as I explained the other day, right mindfulness has the function of a doorkeeper. It's guarding your senses. When you guard your senses, then you are not distracted so easily, your mind becomes concentrated. That's Dhamma Samadhi, right concentration. That's the end of Eightfold Noble Path. Now, if you just stop like that, some people might think that Samadhi is the end all. It's the end, right? You start from Samadhi, it's the linear process. From Samadhi, you go there and stop already. But it's not the end, actually. Samadhi is only an aid for the next two. After you have Samadhi already, you have enough concentration, then you can penetrate the Dhamma. You can understand the Dhamma. When your right mindfulness and your right concentration are combined, and then you have an insight into the true nature of reality, that becomes samajnana, right knowledge, right insight. Now, right insight is only mundane. You have right insight, you see, everything is rising and passing away, suffering is suffering. But you haven't got out of suffering yet. It's not liberation. So you keep on practicing from Samadhi, then you go to samajnana, you got insight already. You mustn't be complacent. You mustn't just say, I can already see rising and passing, so that's enough. No, you have to go beyond that. And beyond that means Sama Vimutti. That is the end point. So, as I said, normally we don't have this Sama Jnana and Asama Vimutti. So we stop at Sama Samadhi, right? So now what most of our teachers have done is that they have made this Noble Eightfold Path into a cyclic process. It's not linear anymore. After Sama Samadhi, you go back to Samadhi. Then they put Sama Jnana under Samadhi. Then when you have Samadhi, then Sama Vimutti occurs as a result. So actually it's the same thing according to the Pali Canon. Did the Buddha explain it as linear? Or is it a cycle like we have been made to understand? In this particular sutta, called Michatta Sutta, in Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Tenths, Sutta number 103, the Buddha explained it linearly, from Samadhi until Sama Vimutti. Because after Sama Vimutti, there's nothing else you can do really. I mean, that is talking about liberation, about arahantship. So jnana will comprise all the Magga jnana, all the first, second, third, fourth Magga jnana, and phala as well. And vimutti is liberation, when totally liberated. So the question, if it is linear, then it's interesting because the Buddha put right mindfulness before right concentration, and then after that comes right knowledge, right insight. So how can that be put into practice? How does it apply then to the current practice of samatha vipassana? Okay, one thing that we have to understand is that the Buddha gave the discourses according to the audience. To the audience who were listening to this particular talk, they probably understood it better in a linear way. That's one thing. Second thing is that there's no contradiction because you still need samatha. In order to have samatha, you need to have sati. Mindfulness is essential for everything. In fact, there's one particular sutta where the Buddha says that I do not say that anyone can get samadhi without mindfulness. You must have mindfulness in order to get samadhi. Then from right mindfulness to right concentration, then you don't stop them. There's already samatha, right concentration. And then vipassana comes again under samanyana. Samanyana refers to all the vipassana insights as well as the magga insights. And then finally, sama vimutti, liberation itself. Well, the Buddha has defined samasati as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. When you talk about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, it doesn't mean that you have to practice all of it. You can practice one of them. And one of them is anapanasati. You are mindful of the breath going in and out. Then you can go to samatha. You can tranquilize your mind. Then you watch mental and physical phenomena. Then you can get samanyana. So it's linear in that sense. From right mindfulness, you can go to right concentration. But there are different grades of concentrations. You can have a very intense sort of concentration. You can have a less intense of concentration. And then from there, you can go to samanyana. In many suttas, the Buddha talked about developing the jhanas. And then after developing the jhanas, you develop the ayatanas. What the commentaries call the arupa jhanas. Actually, the word arupa jhana is not found in the canon as well. It's a commentarial term. Why did the Buddha only confine the word jhana to the 4 rupa ones and not call them the arupa jhanas? That's also a good question. Do more research. Anyway, from sama samadhi, then there are different grades of concentration. And then from there, you go to samanyana. As I said, the Buddha encouraged his monks to do all the jhanas, do all the ayatanas, do all the psychic powers, fly in the air, go underground, and make yourself into many different bodies. After you have played around already, then he says, direct your mind towards the destruction of all the cankers. Just now, did the leper go through all this? It depends on the audience that he's talking to. As I said in many of my talks, he hardly talks about jhanas to lay people. The lay people who became anagamis is interesting to find out. Because we find that the stories about Citta, Upasaka and Upali Upasaka, they are anagamis and they go into jhanas, they practice it constantly. One wonders whether they attained this jhana first and then became anagamis, or after they became anagamis, their minds were so calm that they could do jhana very easily. This is not stated in the scriptures. Do more research. I haven't found it yet. It reminds me also of an interesting account of Sun Lun Sayadaw. Have you all heard of Sun Lun Sayadaw? Very famous Sayadaw in Burma. He was an illiterate farmer. And one day he just had an inclination to start to meditate. So he asked people how to meditate. So people say, you just watch your breath, in, out, in, out. So he did that. He didn't have a teacher, he did it on his own. He finished that, he said, what next? He says, not only must you know the in, out, you must know the contact as well as the awareness, mind and matter. Contact, the touch as well as the awareness of the touch. So he went back and he did that. And then as he did that, he got certain psychic powers, clairvoyance. He could see people are going to get into trouble soon. Then he would go around and say, hey, you better watch out, in a few days' time you're going to get into trouble. And it really happened. And so when people saw him, they got scared and did not go near him. Eventually, he practiced on his own and he became, according to what I read, he became a Sotapan, a Sakadagami, and Anagami, all by himself. And after he became an Anagami or an Arahant, before that he didn't get jhana. He was watching the touch point and consciousness, awareness and sensation, awareness, sensation, awareness, sensation. And then he got his path. After he became an Arahant, he went to see some famous Sayadaws in Mandalay. He was actually only a Samanera at that time, a big Samanera. So they convinced him to become a bhikkhu. He said he didn't want to become a bhikkhu. He said, I prefer to be a Samanera. But anyway, in Burma, it's very unusual for a grown-up to be a Samanera. So they managed to persuade him to become a bhikkhu. And after that, the Sayadaws, because they were learned, they know the Visuddhimagga and all that, they taught him to do all the jhanas and to do all the psychic powers. And he got them very easily. He got them all very easily because he was already an Arahant. So his mind was very easy, very malleable. So he got all the psychic powers and then he tried to recollect, what did I do in the past that I can get enlightened in this life? Then he reflected his past life and he found that he was a parrot in one life. And at that time, one Buddha was around. I think it was Kassapa Buddha. And as a parrot, he offered a fruit to Kassapa Buddha. And it seems, according to his psychic powers, at that time, he said that was his main condition for getting enlightened. But after that, he found that he had many animal lives, very few human lives. That's why he's just an illiterate farmer. It's just surprising that he could get all these psychic powers only after his attainment. So that makes me wonder whether this is also what happened during the Buddha's time, because you can hardly find any sutta where the Buddha taught the lay people jhanas. Hardly any suttas. And yet, you can see Upali, the Upasaka, or Chitta, the Upasaka, for the first type of patient who's incurable. Suppose he's on life support system and his body is festering with balls, and then if under the doctor's advice, one were to disconnect the life support system out of compassion, not with the intention of taking life, what would the karma be like? You have already defined it, actually. You say you didn't take life and you were so sure that your intention was compassion. If you do something out of compassion and without the intention to kill, then it will be something wholesome, right? Now, the question of whether it is ethical to remove or disconnect the life support system is a very hot topic among Buddhist circles. Some people are of the view that it's okay to disconnect, like you said, if you don't have the intention to kill, knowing that that person is going to fare according to his own karma. It's quite different from encouraging him to commit suicide or to give him something to eat to terminate his life. That is something active. But this one is removing a support system because the doctor said that it's a hopeless case. Having said that, I'd like to tell you two stories. If you have attended the World Conference of Buddhism 2 years ago, Ajahn Brahm was there, and there was one lady from Singapore who came up to testify that when she was certified to be in a state of coma and the doctors had really advised the children to disconnect the life support system, she was still conscious and she was hoping that they would not disconnect. And you know, when the doctor said that, she was trying to move her body to show that she was still alive. But she couldn't. She was just paralyzed. But the children did not have the heart to disconnect the support system. And after several days, she regained consciousness. And after that, she did physiotherapy and she could walk again. This is one story. Another story is that of Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw, my Upachaya. I was there when he died in 1982. Now, the circumstances of his death are like that. He was in his office in the evening with his attendant monk. And then suddenly he told his attendant monk, I know something snapped in my brain. And then after that, he slumped over. So immediately, they called the ambulance, took him to the hospital. And he was in a coma for a few days. A few days later, the president of the association came with his committee members, came to see Sayadaw Pandita. Sayadaw Pandita was, at that time, the third in command. The second in command was Sayadaw Sujata in seniority, but he actually had a heart problem, and so he's only a figurehead. Sayadaw Pandita is the one who's making all the administrative decisions. So the committee members came very tearfully and told Sayadaw Pandita to give permission to disconnect the heart pacer, because they said the doctors had already advised them to do so. He's no longer conscious and he's only surviving because of the heart pacer. Now, we monks have Vinaya rules, and to terminate the life of a person consciously before the time is right is a parajika offense. That means you cannot become a monk again. So Sayadaw Pandita was quite taken aback. He said, how can you ask me to do such a thing? I can't give any decisions. Then the president says, the doctor has already assured us that there's no more consciousness. Then Sayadaw Pandita said, if there's no more consciousness, then it's okay. If, you know. He said, if there's no more consciousness, it's okay. So they took that as permission. So they went back to the hospital, brought back Mahasi Sayadaw to the meditation center. They disconnected the electrical heart pacer, but they came with a manual heart pacer with a balloon. So there was a young doctor there pumping his heart from the hospital until the Mahasi center. And the monks were all assembled, all the devotees were assembled in the hall. They carried him to the hall, and then in the presence of everyone, they slowly reduced the speed of pumping, and then they stopped. So after that, we took his body to clean it up. So 2 stories for you to consider. As I said just now, you actually defined your answer already. You said really with compassion, not with intention to kill. If you can really be sure that it's compassion and not because of the intention to get rid of something unsightly or get rid of a burden, then it's okay. The question is, even if it's out of compassion, who has the authority to take away another's life? One school says that you are not taking his life. He is already going. And he might not even be there anymore. This heart pacer is only something mechanical, pumping the blood all around. So you got 2 stories for you. Sent to the hospital. The doctor says that this heart is still strong. He can undergo a bypass. And in the process of doing the bypass, he dies. It is very obvious because the doctor's main intention was not to kill at all. They were trying to save you. And in the process, if you die, that's too bad. Whether Sunung Sayadaw can be considered a Pacceka Buddha because he did not really listen to the Dhamma. But he did listen to the Dhamma, didn't he? He asked someone how to meditate, and that guy told him, you watch your breath, and then after that you watch the touch point and the consciousness. So there is already Dhamma, Desana. And then after that, the Sayadaw taught him how to go into jhana and do all the psychic powers. It's not like now where we have to go through a proper training to get enlightened. He did it by himself. Yeah, you must remember that even during the Buddha's time, there were many people like that. They just heard a small thing and then got enlightened. And also because he's within the Buddha's asana, he's in a Buddhist country, and in the Buddhist culture there, he would have listened to Dhamma talks before. If you ask me something like whether Krishnamurti can be considered a Pacceka Buddha or not, then that's another question, because his teachings are very close to the Buddha's teaching of anatta, and he does a lot of Chittanupassana also, watching the mind. Meditate, and when you've got sloth and torpor, should you continue? In the 4th foundation of mindfulness, Dhammanupassana, contemplation of the Dhamma. The first section is the contemplation of the hindrances. If you have sloth and torpor, you're supposed to be aware that you have sloth and torpor. And then also in the sutta called Chapala Sutta, the Venerable Moggallana was having a lot of sloth and torpor, and the Buddha gave him a whole list of things to do. So you can refer to that sutta. They say that you only remember the last one. The last thing to do is go and sleep. The first there are many other things to do. To look at light, to pull our ears, to try to recite the Dhamma, to try to recollect the Dhamma, try to increase your vitaka. There are many ways. You just look up any meditation manual and you can find out. Right.